Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial, we'll conclude the Progeny of Night, which is just another way of saying family tree, by the way. Alright, we've already covered her children, and now we'll talk about her grandkids. They are the children of Strife, whom we said is also known as Eris or Discord. In a poem titled Works and Days, we are told that Strife is a beast which promotes fighting. She's the type of gal that no one really likes. We as human beings are designed by God to give the angry wretch respect. Go figure, huh? The name of her husband, or pastime lover for that matter, is unknown, but these are her children: Painful Toil, the Spirit of Neglect, who is also called Forgetfulness. Next, we have Limos, more commonly known as Starvation, but sometimes also goes by Famine, depending on what translation you have. Next, we see Tearful Pain, Battles, boom boom, Combats, da-da-da-da-da-da, Bloodshed and Slaughters,
I know your eyes. How dare you?
Quarrels, Lies, Pretenses, Arguments, Disorder and Disaster, both of whom are neighbors, and
Horkos.
whom we'll call off. Alright, let's divvy these up into groups and get to it. From Strife came Painful Toil, Neglect, Famine, and Lacrimal Pain, which means tear-producing pain, by the way. There's clearly a poetic play on words here, but beyond that, try to picture someone working hard without results, in dirty, torn-up clothes, starving, sick, and crying from both emotional and physical pain. That's pretty much the results of war, which comes from strife. Now, in ancient Greek society, Limos represented starvation or famine. Something pretty cool about Limos is that she did not have a fixed gender. We know this because in Sparta there was a temple dedicated to a god named Apollo. And in this temple was a painting of starvation, or Limos, in which she was personified as feminine. But there was also a statue representing Limos as a male. Dun 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 dun. I don't know, I guess the message is that starvation and famine don't discriminate against our sex or gender. Gee, how kind of her. Alright. In our second group, we have Battles, Combats, Bloodshed, and Slaughters. The ting goes pop pop ka 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 ka, skitty keep pop pop, and a pop pop boom boom boom. This is clearly a reference to war, which comes about as a natural cause of strife. The message being, war is naturally born from strife. Now, in our third group, we have Quarrels, Lies, Pretenses, and Arguments. This too is pretty clear in connection with war. We saw this when we talked about Cypria, and we said strife started an argument that led to the kidnapping and rape of a queen named Helen. Also, remember the stuff we said about that old dude named Herodotus? Well, he tells us that everyone involved in the war was going back and forth, reassigning blame to one another, arguing about this and that, and no, but you did this and he did that, and no such blah blah blah. They were all denying claims against each other, whether true or false. It was full of lies and arguments and pretenses and quarrels. Now, in the next and final group, we have Disorder and Disaster, along with
Horkos.
whom we'll call oath. Alright, Disorder and Disaster appear as disorderly government and the power of ruin in one translation, In another, they are lawlessness and recklessness, and so on. But one translation in particular tells us that another way to say disorder and disaster is dysnomia and ati. Ati is an interesting deity because although Hesiod doesn't tell us anything about her father, in Book 19 of a book called the Iliad, a poet named Homer tells us that Ati, whom we'll call Disaster, is the daughter of Zeus. So, since Hesiod tells us she is the daughter of Strife, the belief is that her parents are Zeus and Strife. Alright, Ati is known for blinding people, but not like the cops pointing a flashlight at your face at 2 a.m. It's more along the lines of psychological rigidity and foggy thinking. We are told disorder and disaster neighbor one another, or that they are alike or accomplices, and what this means is simply that they are closely related concepts. Disaster is a power filled with ruin. So, what we are being told is that when the spirit of strife is born, from her will come the blinding thoughts which lead to ruin. Ati is also known as the personification of stupidity, or wrongful thinking, if you will. She walks upon her head and traps whomever Zeus just happens to command her to. She is a special kind of doom, which is the result of wrongful thinking. So, in summary, disorder leads to disaster, and when you have disaster, well, disorder's already there. That's pretty much all I found on those two bad ones. Lastly, we are told of Horkos, or the god of oath, who at his birth was given a group of goddesses known as the Furies as his attendants. Individually, a Fury is called an Erinis. An attendant in ancient Greece, by the way, was a slave. So, in a way, Horkos commands the Furies, who serve a purpose similar to the Fates and the Dooms, insofar as they represent a type of fatal end. Now, in Greek culture, an oath was thought of as a curse that people would place on themselves, and it would begin when the oath was broken. Kind of like when middle school kids say, "Put it on your mama." I don't know why, but I always took that really serious growing up. Anyway, in ancient Greek society, it was customary to drink from a river whenever someone swore. Back then, they really didn't know how deep many of the rivers were, and it was believed some gods lived underneath them. Kind of like the legend of the Loch Ness Monster, but not really. Anyway, whenever someone falsely swore, a god would rise from in these rivers, and his name was
Horkos.
Making false promises, lying, and breaking oaths was frowned upon severely in Greek culture. So much so that later in the text, we will be told that not even the gods were immune from punishment. But that's a story for a later date, so for the meantime, that concludes the Progeny of Night. Peace and thanks for tuning in.
Bow chicka wow wow.
What a sucker.